This, I thought, was just an interesting story to say the least. The New York Times had one of the dumbest articles I think they've written in a long time, and that is saying something. It was entitled, it caught my eye, it was entitled, Trump Fires Black Officials from an Overwhelmingly White Administration. Obviously, the case the New York Times is trying to make here is that, look, this racist president is firing black people specifically because they're black. That, of course, is what they're trying to say ultimately. So we decided, hey, maybe we should fact check this just a little bit and see if that's actually what's happening, or if the people that he's letting go from the administration or from their federal government posts, he didn't want them there to begin with, regardless of what race they actually are. The article starts off with this guy named Robert Primus, who says this: I didn't see this coming at all. Mr. Primus, a Democrat. Oh, hold on. No. He's getting fired because he's black. Also, he's not the same party as the president, so that has nothing to do with it. The only reason we're firing him, according to the New York Times, the only reason Trump is firing him is because he's black. Also happens to be the opposite party of the president. Said in a recent interview, in January, the Trump administration had put a Republican in his place as the chairman of the Surface Transportation Board, which comes as a shock to nobody. Okay, so hold on. The guy that they're replacing is not the party of the president, but the president comes into office and then replaces him with a guy who is of the same party. And for some reason, because he's black, that's racism. Saying that that's racism is actually racist, by the way, just so we're clear on that front. Now, the interesting part about this is that Trump actually appointed this guy in his first term. And so if that says anything to me, it's like, okay, if he appoints the guy, apparently at a certain point in time, he approved of him, and now he doesn't. So firing him shouldn't really be that big of an issue. Now, the article goes on to say that Mr. Primus saw this as the president's prerogative, which effectively says, yeah, Trump has the right to fire me, which made me think, okay, well, this actually, at least he's taking it well, until the article went on to say maybe he felt that this job was not intended for blacks. Really, dude? No, you got fired because you don't agree with the president and what he's trying to do with this country, and especially in his administration. To then turn it around and say, well, the president doesn't think this is a job for black people. No, the president doesn't think this is a job for somebody who disagrees with him. Like, hey, this has always been my favorite, and sorry to go off on a tangent here, but when President Trump was appointing people and continues to appoint people, they say, President Trump appoints a Trump loyalist. Yeah. What is the article supposed to say? President Trump appoints one of his arch nemesis. Like, that's never happened in the history of the world. Find me the article where it says President Obama appoints MAGA right-wing extremists to important position. That has happened 0 times in the history of the United States of America. The article continues to go on and says President Trump's biggest high-profile firing was of a senior black leader in February when he ousted Charles Q. Brown Jr., the second black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which again, the article is effectively saying President Trump only fired him because he's black, which is ridiculous and absurd. The article continues to go on to the reason why, because Pete Hegseth previously said that General Brown should be fired because he's a woke person who focuses on DEI instead of the actual military. So yeah, that's why that guy got fired. It goes on to list a couple other different people that were happened to be black and fired from the president's administration. First of which actually is this lady, Carla Hayden, is the New York Times' words, the first African-American woman to be the to be the Librarian of Congress. First learned she was being fired in a text message. Again, yeah, registered as a lib, supports lib causes. So yeah, the president doesn't want you in his administration. The next person they go into highlight is Gwen Wilcox, who again, they make a big point about this, the first black woman to serve as a member of the National Labor Relations Board in its 90-year history, and was fired again because she doesn't agree with the president and what he's trying to do. Basically, the entirety of this list, this exhaustive list that they talk about, there's you should go read the New York Times article because it's really interesting. This big long graph where look at all of these people. Every single one of the people who happened to be black that President Trump decided to relieve of their duties doesn't agree with him and what he's trying to do. So, New York Times, to make this a racial thing is inherently in and of itself racist. But of course, that's what we see so often from the libs. We just talked to Savannah Hernandez, who some well-meaning lib who was protesting supposedly on behalf of people that look like her and me, says, no, yeah, you're a token. You're not actually qualified for the job. They just want you because you look a certain way. Like, all right, well, that's incredibly demeaning and dehumanizing in and of itself. But libs don't tend to realize that sort of thing in what they're saying. President Trump has also tried to fire Lisa Cook, the first black woman, the New York Times says, to serve on the Fed's board of governors. But she sued to stop him. Last week, the Supreme Court declined to allow Mr. Trump to immediately remove her and said it would review his efforts to oust her in oral arguments this January. In other words, the king, the dictator, Donald Trump, actually has to abide by what the court said. Like we mentioned earlier, several famous kings throughout history have unfortunately been stopped by the courts. Julius Caesar, when he was in Rome, he was the dictator of Rome, was stopped by the courts. Actually, that's probably a bad example because he was stopped by the Senate, and that you know that story. But the bottom line is, kings, generally speaking, historically, haven't listened to people outside of them, but particularly this king that was duly elected by the American people and won the popular vote and the Electoral College and both houses in Congress. That king, who again was elected by the people, also follows the rules of the courts. He has not strayed away from what the courts decide, including in many cases where, well, I'm not even going to say that. If you remember, President Biden, when he was trying to get rid of these student loans unconstitutionally, said, like literally his own words, said, remember, the Supreme Court told me I couldn't, but I did it anyway. To defy the courts is what a king would do, and he actually did, as opposed to President Trump, who admittedly says, well, the court says I can't do this. Let me try it a different way, and then the court weighs in on that particular way that he's trying, and if the court says no, well, he doesn't do it. Which, again, is very kingly and dictatorly. Of course, it's not. But a ridiculous article from the New York Times that I feel like that I wanted to bring to you today.